Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Resident Evil Remake. In the last part we continued our exploration in the guardhouse here outside the mansion, and now it's time we finish up our duties here for the campaign. Plant 42 is much more dangerous here in Remake than it was in the original game, as not only does it have more tentacles trying to swipe at you, it also has pods placed around the room that if you stand around for too long will actually poof gas at you that I believe can outright poison you from memory. Otherwise, it can swipe its tentacles at you, which if you have a knife on you, I believe you can cut, otherwise you should struggle out of it like it's your standard enemy attack and all that. Now, what I'm about to say is effectively true in every boss fight in the game, but more so than the others, I feel like it really is a good idea just to keep moving in this fight, only firing off 1 or 2 shots at a time, maybe 3, as it gives you plenty of time to avoid a tentacle swing or the dropping of acid or gas in your general vicinity and all that. And also, bring the self-defense gun to this fight, because just firing that once at the core will take out a large majority of its health. I want to say when I did a practice run of this game and fought this boss fight, it took over double the ammo because I didn't bring the self-defense gun in. That one magnum shot is really, really worth it. Not the hardest boss, especially if you do the Vigil stuff with Jill, or if you fail in saving Richard and do it as Chris, but keep in mind your health all the same with healing items. In my head, I also always remember an extra cutscene tied to this fight, but I think I'm actually thinking of a cutscene from Resident Evil 4 of all things, because I played them in relatively close order, effectively. Now that Plant 42 itself is dead, though, we can not only exit the room, but if we check the fireplace in the distance, we find the 4th and final major mansion key. This is the helmet key. There have been doors technically taunting us about this as early as the main hall itself. Thus, we can head back to the mansion and take care of what few rooms remain there. We are technically getting close to the end of the game. Part count-wise, we are a little further than I feel like we are gameplay-wise, but that's because usually on a New Game Plus or a repeat playthrough this, I'm skipping some of the cutscenes.
Oh, you scared me. You okay?
Yeah, it's dead. But... Richard... he's... gone.
I'm sorry.
It's my fault. I should have watched out for him.
I found a pharmaceutical room. I think I can come up with something useful. I'll be there. I'm glad you're still okay.
So even if you saved Richard, Rebecca does still show up here at the guardhouse. She just doesn't show up in time to help you with Plant 42. But I forget to showcase this. You actually can go into the room where you make the Vigil and talk to her, and she has some dialogue. And I think she'll also still heal you there, like she did back in the first floor of the West Wing safe room, back in the mansion. At least I think so. I'll see if I can find anything about that between now and the second pass. For now, though, let's get out of here.
Wesker?
Chris, you're alive.
My words exactly. Where's Jill? Thought you were with her.
Yeah, I know. We got separated.
I see. Anyway, we better find a way out of here before we turn into zombie food. Got any suggestions, Wesker?
We should get a better grip on the situation. There must be areas still to be explored in that other mansion. Chris, I want you to check them out one more time. I'll continue my investigation here.
Sure thing.
And thus now we have the direct okay from Dialogue to also head back to the mansion. We are done here. In the meanwhile, though, I want to talk about another member of the staff. In this case, it's the remake's lead composer slash arranger, who is Shusaku Uchiyama. They composed background music for the Sega Saturn and PlayStation versions of Mega Man 8. They did composition for Resident Evil 2, as well as were on the sound team for Devil May Cry 1. After this game, they were also a composer on PN03, Resident Evil 4, Devil May Cry 4 as well, Mega Man 10. And as of their more recent projects, it's things like Operation Raccoon City. They did some support on Theatrhythm, Curtain Call on 3DS. They also worked on the remakes for things like Resident Evil 2. They did composition for Village, Exoprimal. Their most recent roles overall are a composer for Dragon's Dogma 2, and Cardin CL, they did an arrangement for one specific song. Speaking of sound team, I should also start going over the game's voice cast now that I think about it. Starting off with Chris, he's also the same guy who voices Richard. Voiced Richard. He was the official in Emperor's New Groove, the guy who works with Cusco at the start of the movie, and he's also Mr. Krabs and Mermaid Man in Battle for Bikini Bottom's original release. Which I think that's just a funny as hell comparison.
This is Brad. If you can't answer me, somehow give me a sign.
Chris to Brad. Can you hear me? Brad. Damn.
Brad, who we just heard, is also the same voice as Joseph from the game's intro. His most notable role is as Gata in Final Fantasy X, if you know, you know. He was also a voice of Jim Hawkins in one of the games based off Treasure Planet. Wesker here in REmake is played by Peter Jessup, who also played a specific character named Fung in Avatar The Last Airbender. He was a member of the Order of the White Lotus. He's been Brainiac at least once in a video game from 2006, and he was Steppenwolf in Justice League Action back in around mid-2010s. Jill is played by Heidi Anderson, who also played the newscaster at the start of the game's opening FMV, and is Samantha Smith from Killer 7. Barry is played by Ed Smarin, who was also EAS in The Conduit. Meanwhile, Rebecca is played by Hope Levy, or Levi maybe, who was a bunch of characters in Rugrats and As Told by Ginger. She was on the Clockwork Chorus in the original Shrek, as well as being Kay from Ape Escape 3's American dub. Notably, now that we've reached this storeroom again, there's actually some more items placed by either Wesker or Barry, depending on your playable character. Namely, a flash grenade, another first aid spray, and some shotgun shells. Might as well grab them if you have the space. And let's see what they had to say. Use this to protect yourself from that monster in chains that can't be hurt by guns. I also fixed that doorknob to make sure you can get away. Wesker. So effectively, that doorknob that can fall off over by the eastern staircase safe room will no longer fall off through the rest of the game. That limitation is not really something you have to worry about anymore, unless it does fall off after a certain amount of uses again, but it hasn't in my experience. With that said, our return trip to the mansion is going to be a lot faster than our original visit here, but it's going to be a little bit more dangerous for a very specific reason. Namely, now some rooms that had zombies, the zombies are gone, but in their place is an enemy type known as a hunter. They are faster enemies that do more damage, but they're lower in number to compensate. Notably, they can also follow you and jump up and down certain staircases to get to you much more quickly. For instance, there's actually 2 in this room, and we're about to see, I believe, 1 try to jump down to reach me now that I've fought that one off. A couple of shotgun shells will take them down pretty quickly, and with the amount you should have by this point, that's not that big of a deal. Which, that's important to keep in mind. They are easier to hear coming than zombies, though, as they are much heavier on their feet, though they do like to surprise you around some corners here and again. The big thing to watch out with them is their jumps, as while they'll swipe at you and all that, they have 2 distinct jump attacks that are both instant kill. One is where they land on top of you and I believe stab you, but if you're at, I believe it's orange caution or below, they'll jump and swipe at you, which can decapitate you. So always be it above yellow caution when trying to deal with them. Otherwise, just try to ignore them where you can, but they're a lot harder to ignore than their zombie-based cousins. Ow! But that said, worth noting, any defense items you have on either character will also work on them, but only if they do an attack that actively counts as a grab, like the one where they jump and land on you. With that said, using a flash grenade on one of them, as rare as it is to see, is incredibly satisfying. Notably, there's 2 different visual variations of them here in REmake. The standard green ones we've seen since the original, but there's also kind of a purplish red variant based off a different enemy from Resident Evil Code Veronica. The ones in Code Veronica could poison you. I don't think the ones here can, though. I think it is just visual distinctions. So we came over to this room to use the helmet key to unlock this door, which gets us to this puzzle room. But notably, if you're playing as Jill, that's the room I was talking about earlier where you can actually find the lighter, and that's meant to be George Trevor's lighter from the diary. So this puzzle room is easy, but threatening feeling. As we push this statue into this part of the room, the walls are going to start closing in. The statue itself will stop the walls past a certain point, though. With that said, if you don't have the statue, these walls will crush you to death. We want to push this statue to the far end of the room and then run back out around to the first part of the room and then go behind the wall to the right of the screen right now. There's going to be a button over there we can push. Pushing that will make the walls recede back in slowly. Notably, you can also get crushed by them as they're moving back this direction, I believe. While they're moving in this direction and before they start moving back into the other side, you want to quickly run back to where we pushed the first statue and push it into the recession on the opposite side of the room from the statue we just saw. You technically don't have to push it in, you just have to get it in front of it and it'll just slide in from there. The timing on this looks stricter than it actually is, I have to fully admit. It is a lot easier to do than it looks like it is. Notably in the original game, this is actually where you refought the Yawn, but they have moved that elsewhere here in Remake. Before we jump down the hole behind me, I want to grab that dagger because it's going to be nice to have. And, well, Chris Redfield, go down the hole. And over here we got this fancy little book. Will I take the last book, volume 1? Yes, we will. Let's take a look at what's in there. The words of the cover, what can it mean? Eagle of the South, Wolf of the North? Good question. What do the pages have to say? By the way, opening the books in this game is weirdly precise. If you're even slightly tilted one direction, you won't find anything. A medal was hidden inside the book, the Medal of Eagle. This is one of our next long-term goals. The next opportunity you get, just store this away. You're not going to need it for a good while still. But also at the end here is a note. November 29th, 1967. I can't get out. I have tried every possible way to escape, but only to be faced with the reality that I am trapped. I've been everywhere. The laboratory with the large glass tubes filled with formaldehyde, those dark, wet, and eerie caves. What can I do? At first I didn't want to believe my eyes, but that familiar high-heeled shoe in the corridor. It was like reflex. One name came to my mind. Jessica. I don't want to believe they share the same fate as me. No, I can't give up hope. I have to hope they're alive. November 30th, 1967. I haven't had anything to eat or drink for the past few days. I feel like I'm going crazy. Why is this happening to me? Why do I have to die like this? I was too obsessed with designing this ghastly mansion. I should have known better. November 31st, 1967. It was a dark and damp underground tunnel, and another dead end. But even in the darkness, something caught my eye. Carefully, I lit the last match I had to see what it was. A grave. But deeply engraved into the stone was my name. George Trevor. At that instant, it all became clear to me. Those bastards knew from the beginning that I'd die here and fall right into their trap. But it's too late now. I'm losing it. Everything's becoming so far away. Jessica, Lisa, forgive me. Because of my ego, I got both of you involved in this whole damn conspiracy. Forgive me. May God justify my death in exchange for your safety. George Trevor. A name is carved into the small gravestone. George Trevor. There's a switch. Press it. Now, I'm just going to assume that that button wasn't there when all that happened to him? Because otherwise, how did he not find his way out of there? I've always found that kind of silly, but oh well. Also, arachnophobia warning. We got more of the giant spiders in here. So at this point, we're in the basement of the mansion. And we've technically been on this floor before. This is where the kitchen was that we saw much earlier in the LP back in like part 4, I think it was. In the original game, this actually had, I think, the scariest music track in the game. But it's a different track here that's a lot more atmospheric and nowhere near as actually kind of soul-piercing as that song is to me. Our goal here is to actually hit a switch to power something up. Because notably, you might remember when we first visited the kitchen, there was a door we couldn't unlock because it was locked from one side, but there was an elevator that had no power. Now that we're over here with the use of the helmet key, we can power that elevator up by throwing the circuit breaker up. Now, the kind of funny thing about the mansion at this point in the game is that while hunters themselves are more dangerous than an individual zombie, their appearance actually makes the mansion usually quite a bit safer than it was prior. Namely, their arrival will despawn several zombies, as I said, and that includes any that became Crimson Heads in the case they're in those rooms. On top of that, if memory serves, the one dangerous zombie bonus mode I talked about before, where Forrest is shambling around specific rooms and any damage incurred to him explodes the mansion, I think once you come back with the helmet key, he just never shows up again. So once you get to the guardhouse, I think you're just safe. on that mode, which is kind of funny. It looks like the power supply for the elevator. The main fuse is blown out. Switch over. Power supply appears to be functioning again. So now we can use the elevator in the kitchen to reach the 3rd floor of that section of the mansion. Speaking of the kitchen, the next door will actively take us there. With that said, my next destination isn't that elevator yet. I instead want to make a detour back towards the 1st floor safe room in the West Wing, as over in that general vicinity, now that we have the helmet key, there's another door we can unlock that will allow me to grab some items I'm going to want for later. And that's the more important thing. Sad thing, though, at this point in the game, because the hunters have spawned in, Jerry has unfortunately despawned. He lasted as long as he could, but unfortunately the best zombie in the series cannot stand up to a hunter. That there, I think, is the instant kill attack, but I had a flash grenade, so eat that and eat this. Another thing that makes hunters weirdly safer for the mansion than the zombies are is that while they're also fewer in number, they also have few opportunities where they'll like jump from room to room to get you on top of jumping through windows to get you. At most, I think it happens twice depending on your routing. And honestly, the most notable of those is not only easy to deal with because they show up one at a time, but also if you just don't go a certain direction, it's never going to happen. Once I reshuffle my inventory in this safe room, though, my next destination is actually the only door in the hallway above us we have yet to investigate. In fact, I think it is directly above me right now. What's always weird is that in my head, this room is earlier in the game in both versions, but no, you do it about this late in either the remake or the original game. I think that phenomenon is caused by two things. For one thing, as I brought up earlier, I often am skipping cutscenes on a repeat playthrough. But also, since I tend to replay either version of this game as Jill, I have more inventory spaces, so I'm technically getting here faster because there's less inventory box reshuffles. Alright, so in this room, we have an eagle statue that's constantly rotating to face us. That might seem a little ominous. It technically is, but it's not that big of a deal to actually deal with. What it's doing is actually interacting with the ox head or elk head on either side of the room. What that means will become more clear once I turn the lights off in here. For right now, we got a mail from the Chief of Security. Confidential. Attention, Chief of Security. Date, July 22nd, 1998, 2:13. X day is drawing up on us. Execute the following procedures within 1 week. Prompt actions are demanded. 1. Lure S.T.A.R.S to the estate and obtain BOW's raw combat data against S.T.A.R.S. 2. Collect 2 embryos of each mutated specimens as samples, excluding the tyrant. Dispose of the tyrant. 3. Ensure complete disposal of the Arclay laboratory, including all personnel and test animals. Disguise their deaths as an accident. When the above procedures are executed, report to headquarters for further instructions. If for some reason you are unable to execute the procedure by the deadline, report immediately. In case of emergency situations, report directly to extension number 5691. Good luck, Umbrella Headquarters, Umbrella Incorporated. So, us being here was planned and it's a setup. God damn it. So my next action is to push the dressers on either side of the room to the extremes because we need to actually reach either of these mounted heads. You might notice that the bird's eye is glowing. That's a security system. Whenever the bird is directly facing one of the two heads, it locks something in them in place, and you can see what those things are by turning off the lights. Each of these two mounted heads has a glowing eyeball that is an item we can grab. When the eagle is facing it, that jewel is locked into place. In this case, on the elk head, we got the red gemstone, and we're going to get another one from the ox head. Or I guess buffalo head. The best way to do this is to kind of bait the eagle one direction and then run directly underneath it, because it takes a second to realize that you're moving on the other side of it. This has always been a room that's just kind of stuck with me, and honestly, I really do like the updated visuals here. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 9... now that we have the yellow and red gemstones, we're going to go put one immediately to use before storing the other one and heading elsewhere in the mansion with the helmet key. See you guys then.